This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The African Union and the UN call for calm as Lagos authorities struggle to enforce curfew. U.S. President Donald Trump rallies the crowds in North Carolina ahead of his final presidential debate against Joe Biden. And Africa's CDC says the coronavirus cases are nearing 1.7 million with over 40,000 deaths. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Ntal live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. China is pegged to be the only major economy projected to grow this year. And in sports, Cricket World Cup holders England to tour South Africa in November. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Ntal. Let's begin here in Kenya, where a court has deferred the sentencing of two men found guilty for their roles in the 2013 Westgate attack. Mohammed Ahmed Abdi and Hussein Hassan Mustafa will have to wait until next Friday to know the duration of their prison terms. The two were found guilty of conspiracy to commit a terrorist act. 67 people were killed when gunmen stormed a busy shopping mall in September 2013. Somali militant group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. The two found guilty of aiding the attackers could face jail terms of up to 20 years. All right, we have with us in studio CGTN reporter Daniel Arap Moy. He has just returned from the courtroom where he was following that particular decision. Daniel, let's get straight into it. Daniel, explain to us what has transpired in the Kenyan Westgate terror sentencing that was expected today.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. Now, court was supposed to make its final decision today of sentencing of the two suspects that were found guilty a few days ago or a week ago, but court wasn't able to do that today. And the reason being, last time before court adjourned, the defense was supposed to come back with the witness statement, rather victim statement. But unfortunately, today the defense says that they are not ready to present before court the victim's statement. So courts did decide that maybe they need to be given more time, which is 1 week. So they're most likely to return after 1 week to present the victim's witness statement. But of course, court did hear today that about 9 people have so far recorded their statement, which has been received and shared with the defense. So 2 of the victims were supposed to also record their statement this afternoon, which we hope they will do today. But the defense did say, the prosecution did say that yes, there are so many people that are willing to give their statement, to record down their statement. And of course, this attack affected so many foreigners. So there are a number of foreigners that are willing to come forward to record their witness statement, which the court did say that yes, we need to give them time so that they're able to come and record their statement. So we do expect that probably by next week, all those that are coming forth to record their statement will have done so, and court will decide then.
All right, Daniel, there has been a lot of talk about the suspect who was acquitted and soon after kidnapped. Talk to us about that.
Yes, one of the suspects, Omar, was acquitted last week when the court sat. But unfortunately, he was abducted right away after he had left court premises. Now, we don't know where he is until up to now. But today, during the court hearing, that matter came up. So the defense did raise that matter before the judge. And the judge has ordered for an immediate investigation into the abduction and the disappearance of this suspect. Now, there are other issues that, of course, were also raised. And the judge was saying that this sets a very bad precedence when it comes to issues of suspect disappearance, abduction, and the court itself is at risk. Mm-hmm. And that is the word that the judge actually brought forward, that it could actually scare not just the judge himself, but both the defense bench and the prosecution bench. So he has ordered for immediate investigation, and he said that if there's any organization, any human rights organization that is willing to take up this case, to investigate it further, they are very much welcome to take up this case so that they come to the bottom of this case, because it's become actually a matter of concern to not just the judge himself, that several times lawyers have come to court and said, please, our people are being abducted. Once after you set them free, they're abducted, so we don't know where they take them. Mm-hmm. But of course, the prosecution did say that the abduction of Omar may not necessarily be by the state. Mm. So he has said that investigation is ongoing to find out exactly who abducted Omar, and if they find out who it is, they will be brought before court of law, or they will face the arm of the law. So basically that is it. But that is a case that court has said it's really, really critical, and they must make sure that it's addressed and addressed now.
Oh, well, without a doubt, abduction is an issue of great concern. Daniel Arab Moy, I would like to thank you for coming to speak to us here on Africa Live. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
And thank you, too.
All right, let's turn our attention to Nigeria, where police report 20 people have been killed by a group of gunmen in Zamfara State. The attack took place in Tongar Kwana village in northwestern Nigeria. A police spokesperson said bandits targeted residents who they suspect are informants for security agencies in the area. Last week, information provided by villagers helped security troops locate some of the bandits. Security forces have launched a hunt to arrest the illegal gunmen in the area and bring them to justice. And staying in Nigeria, the African Union and the UN have strongly condemned the deadly violence in the city of Lagos. Chairperson of the AU Commission, Musa Faki Mohammed, has called on all parties to consider dialogue to prevent further violence. The violence that erupted on Tuesday during protests has resulted in at least one death and dozens of injuries. On Wednesday, Television Continental's building went up in flames after youth stormed the premises and set it ablaze. The private television station is believed by many to be owned by Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He is a former governor of Lagos State. Many also believe he owns the toll gate where soldiers were accused of opening fire on Nigerian protesters. An Israeli delegation has been in Sudan to discuss normalizing diplomatic ties between the two countries. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the United States has begun the process of removing Sudan from its list of states that sponsor terrorism. At the same time, Washington is working to get Khartoum to recognize Israel. The U.S. is helping to cement Israeli relations with Arab states. This week, top aides to U.S. President Donald Trump escorted Israeli delegates to Bahrain and the UAE. And in Guinea, tensions remain high since Sunday's presidential election. Security Minister Albert Damatang Kamara said at least 7 people have been killed in clashes between opposition protesters and the police. Many others have been injured. Clashes reportedly began after Guinea's electoral body announced partial results showing President Alpha Condé in the lead. Now, before the announcement, Condé's main challenger, opposition leader Celo Diallo, had declared himself winner of the elections. The security minister said the ongoing chaos was orchestrated to cast doubt on the polls. The push for a third term for the 82-year-old incumbent has sparked repeated protests over the past year. African nations continue to see contrasting statistics for COVID-19. Some countries are reporting declining tallies, while others are seeing a second wave of infections. The Africa CDC puts the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa at well over 1.6 million. Deaths are at over 40,000. The continent has recorded a significant number of recoveries at 1.3 million. Only 3 countries on the continent have reported more than 100,000 cases: South Africa, Morocco, and Egypt. The Southern and Northern Africa regions remain the most affected. To revive their economies, several governments have been reopening borders and schools and relaxing restrictions and movement and gatherings. And now to the latest on the U.S. presidential elections, which is less than 2 weeks away. President Donald Trump rallied supporters in North Carolina, while former President Barack Obama stepped in Pennsylvania on behalf of Democratic candidate Joe Biden. Trump and Biden are scheduled to have their final debate in Tennessee on Thursday. Jagruti Dave has more.
Barack Obama's first in-person campaign appearance on behalf of his former running mate. It happened as a drive-in rally in Philadelphia. And with echoes of his speech from the Democratic National Convention, Barack Obama launched a scathing attack on the man who succeeded him at the White House.
He hasn't shown any interest in doing the work or helping anybody but himself and his friends, or treating the presidency like a reality show that he can use to get attention.
He attacked him on the pandemic, saying that he can't even take the basic steps to protect himself. And he said that the presidency doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. In return, President Trump was giving a rally in North Carolina, and he returned the attacks on Barack Obama. President Trump has often said that he wouldn't be president if it weren't for the failures of the Barack Obama administration. He also launched attacks, as he has been doing, on Joe Biden and his policies around taxation, as well as others. Let's take a listen.
Protect your incredible Second Amendment. Defend our borders, maintain energy independence, and ensure more products are proudly stamped with the phrase, "Made in the USA."
After that first presidential debate in Cleveland, which was so chaotic, the Debates Commission had introduced a new rule that would allow mics to be muted for the first 2 minutes of each segment, open, so that each candidate can have 2 minutes uninterrupted to cover their opening statement. So it will be interesting to see whether there will be as many interruptions in this final encounter between the two candidates.
Well, the head of the FBI and the U.S. Director of National Intelligence say Russia and Iran are trying to interfere in the 2020 presidential elections. Officials say both countries have obtained voter data and attempted to spread misinformation to the American public.
We are not going to tolerate foreign interference in our elections or any criminal activity that threatens the sanctity of your vote or undermines public confidence in the outcome of the election. When we see indications of foreign interference or federal election crimes, we're going to aggressively investigate and work with our partners to quickly take appropriate action.
Officials say the information was designed to incite social unrest and damage President Trump. The news comes just 13 days before the election, and as millions of Americans have already cast their ballots. Alireza Murayusefi, a spokesperson for Iran's mission to the United Nations, has denied Tehran's involvement. Britain and the European Union are about to restart Brexit trade talks on Thursday, with just weeks left to secure a deal. The UK had been refusing to resume negotiations over a future free trade deal, with Prime Minister Boris Johnson signaling he was ready to abandon the process. But after a phone call between the two sides, Johnson's office says a deal is possible. However, analysts warn there are still issues that could torpedo chances of an agreement. They include UK state subsidies, a mechanism for resolving future disputes, and fishing rights. The Thai Prime Minister is offering somewhat of an olive branch to anti-government protesters by saying the state of emergency will be lifted if there is no violence overnight. As such, the emergency measures will be allowed to expire on Thursday. In a recorded speech, Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha said he is taking steps to de-escalate tensions, including the move to recall Thailand's parliament out of recess for a special session next week to debate the crisis. You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more news coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. Domestic workers lose jobs and salaries as coronavirus changes life in South Africa. And we continue with our series on innovations in Africa to deal with the COVID-19.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba, Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Millions of domestic workers have been affected by the COVID-19 outbreak in South Africa. A new survey shows underemployment among domestic workers peaked during the lockdown. 80% of respondents reported that they worked fewer than 8 hours a day. 74% earned less than $150 a month, up significantly from the pre-lockdown figure of 37%. CGTN's Yulisa and Jamela spoke to a domestic worker who's been negatively affected by the lockdown. Let's take a listen.
The lockdown period dealt a serious blow to the domestic work industry. A lot of employers had to retrench their domestic workers because they had also lost their jobs or income, or their businesses had to close. A new survey by home cleaning company Sweep South paints a stark picture of the lives of those who clean homes and offices. The study attributes this to reduced spending by middle-class households due to the lockdown. The survey was conducted among some 5,000 domestic workers. Tembeka Ngcobo is one of those domestic workers who were adversely affected by the lockdown. Ngcobo had a full-time domestic job in one of the suburbs in Johannesburg. A few weeks into the lockdown, her employers asked her to stay at home. They told her that they could only pay her upon her return.
It was so difficult. I mean, at first, I thought the lockdown won't be so long, so I will return to work soon. Or at least, my employers will allow me to come for a few days instead of full time. Then days became weeks, then a couple of months. So it was no work, no pay. You can imagine. What does one eat? I've got family members who depend on me. So in my family, we were all desperate.
Like Ngcobo, many domestic workers are the sole providers for their families. The dire financial strait that she found herself in mirrors that of the majority of domestic workers here in South Africa.
You know,
Even where I stay in the township, I know many people like me. We ended up just trying to help each other with whatever little we had. But as you can imagine, I was now just trying to get food for myself on a daily basis. What about the family who depend on me? I had sleepless nights just thinking about what they could possibly be eating.
Even as the lockdown eased up over months, Ngcobo's employers continued to ask her to stay put. She then decided to make a temporary plan to ensure survival. In her township, she started selling food on the side of the street. She did this until her employers asked her to return about a month ago. And since then, she's had to deal with a new normal.
And I'm grateful that I was called back. Back where I stay, a lot of domestic workers have either had their work substantially reduced or They were not called back at all.
According to Statistics South Africa's 2019 quarterly labor force survey, the country has almost 1 million domestic workers. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, still in South Africa, school playgrounds have become a lot quieter with the country still under a partial lockdown. COVID-19 infection rates have been relatively low among children, but educational facilities are taking no chances. Strict social distancing rules are followed in classrooms, corridors, and on the playing field since children were allowed back to school. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
COVID-19 social distancing signs mark the corridors at Johannesburg's Summerwood Primary School. There's little time to play or chatter with friends in the morning. Children are filed quickly into their classrooms to start their day.
We've been forced to keep kids as quiet as possible, keep them disciplined, keep them organized. But now we're slowly moving back into a little bit of play and excitement. And I think the kids really need it. They need to start feeling human again.
Grades are split and follow bi-weekly schedules. Class sizes have been trimmed to 20, and children are not allowed to interact or share books, pens, or lunches.
In the classrooms, we try and put them at one table, and each child has their own table. My class is smaller, so I've tried to arrange it in a comfortable way for the children. When they line up, they know that there's social distancing, they know the rules, and that makes it a lot easier.
Break times too are less exciting. The focus has been on keeping children virus-free, while teachers keep a careful watch.
I think there's a switch in the mind that gets tripped. It's lunchtime, I need to run and play. So it is a little bit more challenging to manage and control the children at break. But having said that, we've overcome that by creating different areas for different groups to have their break, and we've staggered the break times.
When their masks are off, they're not allowed to socialize. They can eat their lunch, and then afterwards they can do whatever they want. So some of them will want to do running races, for example, or they'll want to play with a ball. As long as there's social distancing, and as long as we sanitize, and as long as they keep their masks on.
These children have settled well into their new routine. The challenge is now getting through the last few weeks of the school year and preparing them for 2021. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Zimbabwe's education minister has directed schools to roll out online lessons amid an ongoing teacher strike. But there are concerns that online learning may not be as effective as face-to-face teaching. Farai Mwakatuya reports.
Tembo Nashema Kumborenga is unhappy. She had to bring her daughter back home from boarding school because there are no teachers.
They spent the last 3 weeks doing nothing. They were just watching videos and playing all day.
As the stalemate over teachers' pay continues and with exams looming, parents are worried, but the government insists the show must go on.
The learning does not stop, has not stopped, and it is continuing. We are still on our online platforms. We're still having the radio lessons. We have had to distribute even physical copies and modules of self-study guides for those who did not have perhaps radio reception.
But not everyone is sold on the effectiveness of online learning.
When a student gets some of their answers incorrect, they need an explanation of where they went wrong, so the teacher needs to be there in person to do that. Also, my child might be on the phone texting their friends or watching videos instead of doing schoolwork. Lastly, I may not always have money to buy the data needed.
However, the school owner says there are appropriate technologies to cater for everyone.
I believe that WhatsApp can work in the rural areas, even deep in some of the underprivileged societies. They have that small phone. It's possible. So I don't think that really WhatsApp is a setup for the urban areas.
He's been using WhatsApp since schools were closed and intends to continue post-COVID-19.
I believe that as we move forward, I would not be running a full-time school myself. I would run or maybe a distance learning school where learners may come to school. I may need them maybe 2 days a week, and then 3 days they are doing online learning. It cuts on cost of transport to reduce the pressure on our facilities.
Thousands of teachers have not reported for duty since the resumption of schools, citing financial incapacitation and want their salaries increased to counter soaring inflation. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And to our Africa Innovation Series now, the use of drones to combat the spread of COVID-19 has been a game changer across the continent. More African countries are using the technology as a tool to create awareness and monitor the pandemic. Nations are also integrating drones into their supply chains. Here is CGTN's Robert Nagila with more on that report.
About 45 kilometers west of Mali's capital Bamako, in the village of Sibi, Musa Jaira, a tech engineer, uses his drone to educate people about COVID-19.
Our target is those that do not believe in the existence of this disease. We're also targeting those who live in remote areas without access to a TV, radio, or the internet. The drone helps create awareness on COVID-19.
The drone's made from recycled material and programmed by Musa.
70% of the components are made from used plastic bottles and plastic waste. We also make our own programs for the drones. And we use other programming software, but we do make our own and encrypt it ourselves.
Across Africa, more countries are using drones to combat the pandemic. In Tunisia, drones donated by China and equipped with temperature sensors and loudspeakers have been deployed by the Health Ministry to control the spread of COVID-19. Over in Ghana, Aquamare Drone Tech uses drones to disinfect public spaces. The company plans to expand its services to neighboring countries. And in the Greater Zanin municipality in northern Limpopo in South Africa, drones have been used to educate people about COVID-19 prevention in local languages and to monitor potential hotspots. In Rwanda and Ghana, Zipline, the company that pioneered medical deliveries to rural communities, now stocks and delivers COVID-19 products to health facilities. And global bodies such as the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, and the International Civil Aviation Organization are raising awareness. Early this year, the forum's aerospace and drone community came together to review how drones could be used to battle COVID-19 and how best to integrate them into supply chains. Drones can also assist in capturing data and providing jobs for the developing tech sector. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Time now for our business segment. Here's what's ahead. Coming up in business, China is pegged to be the only major economy projected to grow this year. And the IMF revises Egypt's growth predictions up to 3.5% for this year.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to China's economy now. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He said Wednesday that the country's decision to contain the pandemic before restoring its economy was perfectly right. He was speaking at the Financial Street Forum in Beijing, saying that it's highly probable that China would register positive growth this year, and that's because key economic indicators are improving quarter by quarter. Liu added that the Chinese economy is witnessing some new trends. Those include more emphasis on new industries and additional attention to green development. Liu also reiterated China's determination to advance an all-round opening up of its economy. The governor of China's central bank, Yi Gang, and senior banking and security regulators also spoke at the Financial Street Forum. They detailed plans for future policy moves. Let's take a listen.
Monetary policy must maintain a balance between stable economic growth and risk prevention. Neither let the market be short of money nor allow money to overflow from the market. Keep the money supply basically matching the growth rate of nominal GDP, which reflects potential output. We should implement normal monetary policy for as long as possible and maintain a normal upward sloping yield curve.
Financial institutions should give full play to their professional advantages, do a good job in wealth management, increase residents' property income, and realize the long-term growth of people's wealth. In the meantime, financial institutions should also prevent risk spillover, maintain market stability, and improve social welfare.
We will steadily promote an open and transparent registration-based IPO system throughout the capital market, based on our experience from the piloting of the STAR market and the Chinex board. We will also modify the information disclosure rules to meet investors' needs, set up diversified and inclusive conditions for companies to qualify for listing, and improve the assurance and underwriting mechanisms.
The International Monetary Fund says GDP in the Asia-Pacific region will shrink 2.2% in 2020, and that's because the coronavirus pandemic hit China, South Korea, and Japan hard earlier on. The region has since been praised for its response to the crisis. Giles Gibson reports from Washington.
The IMF says 2020 will see Asia's most severe contraction in generations, the region where the coronavirus emerged before wreaking havoc across the globe. China, though, is expected to be the only major economy in the world to grow this year.
China, which suffered the blow from the pandemic earlier than other countries, has seen a very strong recovery since the first quarter lockdown, and growth has now been revised up to 1.9% this year, a rare positive figure in a sea of negatives.
But the IMF says India's economy, another of the region's major players, will contract by more than 10% in 2020. India could also soon overtake the US as the country with the most coronavirus cases in the world.
Throughout this year's annual meetings, the IMF and World Bank have repeatedly urged leaders to work together to fight the virus, including making a potential vaccine available to every single country at an affordable price.
And the IMF says world leaders should also study how some countries in Asia have responded to COVID-19.
Relaxing containment measures only after the virus has been suppressed, and with appropriate complementary policies, such as broad testing and contact tracing capacity, seems to be associated with better economic outcomes. On both counts, Asia has done well in comparison to other regions.
Off the back of that response, the IMF is forecasting the Asia-Pacific region will rebound into solid growth in 2021. But it also sees major risks looming on the horizon, including trade tensions between the US and China and a potential resurgence of the coronavirus. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
The International Monetary Fund is calling on European leaders to maintain financial support for businesses and workers as a second wave of COVID-19 hits much of the EU. The IMF says Europe has managed to save millions of jobs through employment retention schemes, but it also says that now isn't the time to wind back those programs. Trent Murray reports from Frankfurt.
Heading in the right direction, but still more to do. That's the message from the International Monetary Fund when it comes to Europe's economic response to the COVID-19 crisis. The IMF's Regional Director for Europe, Alfred Kummer, says the economic hit has been enormous. The IMF is predicting a 7% decline in Europe's GDP this year. Now, they do say it will rebound by 4.7% next year, but that's still well below their pre-pandemic forecast of 6.3%. Now, it is important to note that this revised economic update comes at a time where much of Europe is facing tighter restrictions as a result of the resurgence of coronavirus. The last 6 months have shown that forced lockdowns can act like a sledgehammer to growth as businesses shut up shop and unemployment grows. The IMF says it's doing its best to incorporate renewed restrictions into its modelling. But I asked Mr. Kummer, with the situation changing so rapidly, just how difficult is it to make those forecasts, as well as whether any European governments have called for the IMF's help in understanding the impact of a second lockdown on their respective economies?
In these circumstances, actually, we rely very much on epidemiologists, on how to model the pandemic and how these the virus response is going to evolve, and we are then building the bridge. So our forecast in the VO and in the RIO, we are using these models, and we are discussing, of course, our projections with the our partners when we are making these forecasts, and we are sharing our models with them.
While the IMF has high praise for what it calls Europe's unprecedented policy response to the crisis so far, it does stress that governments shouldn't withdraw their economic support prematurely. Trent Murray, CGTN, Frankfurt.
The International Monetary Fund has also revised upwards growth projections for Egypt. The lender says the North African country will achieve a 3.5% economic growth this year from an earlier projection of 2% made in June. From Cairo, here is Yasser Hakim with more details.
More positive news on Egypt's economic performance during the corona pandemic. The country has naturally faced a drop in revenue, a huge strain on the budget, and economic growth half of the pre-COVID 6% target. Yet results so far are better than most countries in the continent and the region.
In my view, the main success came as Egyptian financial institutions and the government worked hand in hand to take a balanced approach to the outbreak of the virus. A partial lockdown was placed. At the same time, production went into full throttle while maintaining health procedures to keep the economy open. This was unlike many countries in Europe or the US or Turkey that did not manage to balance both sides early on, which led to acute contraction of the economies.
The Deutsche Bank report says the growth is supported by government spending, an expansion in the ICT and energy sectors, growth in net exports, and the mega construction and infrastructure projects funded by the state.
If we look at Egypt, there are a variety of sources of revenue that create growth for the economy. The Suez Canal, tourism, aviation, industries, service sectors, expatriate remittances, treasury bills. It's a variety that can sustain you in a recession, unlike some economies that depend on one source, such as petroleum or oil and gas. If it drops, the economy breaks down.
Direct foreign investments have increased as well by 11% year-on-year amidst the pandemic, raking in more hard currency. Going forward, the IMF and Deutsche Bank reports have agreed that Egypt will continue a gradual recovery as growth rates would reach 5.8% by 2025. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The U.S. government has commenced the process of delisting Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Following the announcement, the Sudanese government is now calling for acceleration in the adjustment of its foreign exchange rate. CGTN's Daniel Pearson has that report.
The U.S. intention to remove Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism has initiated responses within the Sudanese government. There's been calls for acceleration in the adjustment of the country's foreign exchange rate.
The adjustment of the foreign exchange rate in a quick time frame allows the Sudanese people working abroad to not suffer. That money that they send back home is not exchanged at a rate of 55 Sudanese pounds on the dollar. This is not fair to citizens. With the adjustment of the foreign exchange rate, we can guarantee that remittances will apply to the official banking rate.
Complying with the deal with President Trump's administration, Sudan transferred $335 million as compensation for the American victims of twin terrorist attacks on U.S. embassies in 1998. Being on the U.S. terrorism list bar Sudan from actively securing debt relief and external borrowing.
Sudanese financial institutions can re-establish banking ties with Western banks, especially those in the United States and Europe. For example, current efforts are targeting restarting a relationship with Citibank and reopening its offices that were once operating in Sudan, possibly by the onset of 2021.
Sudan is currently in the midst of an economic crisis, which has accelerated since the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir last year.
The revolution happened, and after we removed Omar al-Bashir, we thought that we would be removed from the list. The decision came late. The country is at a difficult stage, only God knows. We don't know what this decision will do for us.
Thanks to US sanctions going back to the 1990s, Sudan has been largely cut off from the international banking system.
Honestly, meat is expensive, vegetables are expensive. I hope that with this decision, our situation will improve and people can buy meat and vegetables and their lives would be better.
The Sudanese pound has gained on the black market to 220 against the dollar, from around 250 following the announcement. The official exchange rate is around 55. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Tech and innovation experts met online for the Singularity U South Africa Summit. The annual event allows experts from around the world to discuss and share their knowledge and experience about solutions to socioeconomic problems that plague our world. Sumitra Naidu attended the summit to find more about this year's discussions.
Climate change, adverse weather, water, sanitation, poverty and food are just some of the topics being discussed at this year's Singularity U Summit. Experts are pushing the use of more technologies and new innovation to help solve these pressing issues.
When it comes to water in particular, and there's a leak that's non-revenue water and that nobody's aware of, not even the municipality for all its intelligence is aware of. So with just technology, we give municipalities the ability to, in real time, know when a leak has happened, fix that leak so that that water doesn't just disappear.
For South Africa, rising unemployment remains a crisis. Poor education has always been a sore point for the ruling party, but many argue that traditional academics is no longer the answer.
You don't need a high level of education to use IoT. You don't need a high level of education to use the cloud or AI. These technologies are now getting to a point where practical supersedes intelligence, if you want to call it that.
New skills are proving beneficial in some parts.
The little secret about artificial intelligence is that it needs a lot of data in order for the algorithms to work correctly. And the machine doesn't know what a cat looks like. It needs a human to look at 1 million photos of a cat and tell the machine this is a cat. And that is an incredible job that's coming into the world, is data labeling.
A lot of these technologies are well suited, in my belief, just to Africa. It's because we don't have money. For example, we have worked with plumbers. They are now have made themselves digital plumbers. And what that does for the people in the household is now you're able to get daily readings of your water, so you better use your water.
We cannot wait to, be at a position where things have fallen apart before we resort to leveraging technology. Technology is an enabler. It will enable us achieve a lot, especially in reimagining the future. Our leaders have to drive that.
Only time will tell how the 4IR will play out in South Africa. Investment is in short supply and corruption is endemic. The country needs political will. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, staying in the country, Uber, the cab-hailing service, has expanded its offering in South Africa to include an app-based over-the-counter medicines delivery service. Uber is working in conjunction with local pharmaceuticals and medical supplies companies, Medicare. Angela Coppola has more on this story.
Analysts in the online tech environment were expecting the hailing service to look at diversifying into other market segments, especially during lockdown. It's seen as an attempt to gain market share from established pharmaceutical companies in South Africa.
Some of the pharmacy companies themselves had entered that space. Dis-Chem, for example, introducing a bicycle delivery service. Clicks also managing to continue operating during lockdown thanks to being able to deliver pharmaceutical products. So once you add those success stories, firstly, the massive global success story of Uber Eats, and then the success of local pharmacy deliveries, it was obvious that Uber would start expanding into those delivery areas as well.
Uber is now being likened to a courier company with this expansion into medicines. It's been driven by a need for a wide range of on-demand services from consumers.
It seems to be taking it segment by segment. So from food to medicine and now to pet food. So it'll probably prove that it can deliver pet food on demand. And after pet food, there's no telling what it can deliver next. We might find that you can order clothes through Uber.
The South African operation has had some success in branching out into other areas.
Uber Eats partnered with many small players, including grocery delivery services during lockdown that gave Uber drivers as well as some of these grocery entrepreneurs a bit of a lifeline.
The cab-hailing company is known for its ability to move quickly into market segments that it's not dominant in. This is just another instance of that. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Time now for a short break. More news coming your way after the break. Here's a look at what's ahead. South African artist tries to capture the love and emotions triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic.
L'Afrique, à nouveau secouée par le démon du coup d'État.
Mais il était tellement puissant qu'on ne peut pas l'écarter. Il faut l'éliminer physiquement.
Il a été froidement abattu, sans résistance.
You got Thomas Sankara everywhere.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Indiro Coffee recently launched its first sign language cafe in Uganda. The unique cafe aims to empower people with hearing impairment in the East African country. CGTN's Chao Mgono has more on that.
This is Indiro Coffee, a sign language cafe located in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. All of the staff have a hearing impairment and communicate using sign language. It's the first cafe of its kind in the city.
When the world sees a person with a disability or people with hearing impairments, they think those people depend on others. They think persons with disability cannot work on their own. But the first customers, in the first week, we started showing interest. They didn't know sign language, but they tried.
Customers communicate with the staff by writing down their orders.
You find a little sticky note tin with a pen in it. You also do get a form on top of the menu, so whatever I guess tickles your fancy and how you want to order. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You just write it down.
According to the Ugandan Health Ministry, over 2 million Ugandans suffer a degree of hearing loss.
My dream is to see deaf people empowered, economically empowered through coffee. I believe this business is going to give deaf people jobs as we expand.
The cafe opened its doors to customers last month and has ensured that COVID-19 safety precautions are well observed.
We're all struggling in this period, but by brewing all the good we can, we're offering great opportunity for the vulnerable community to, get leadership, get opportunities to work. So yes, so bold move, but bring all the good we can requires bold moves.
Indiro Coffee hopes to create more intimate spaces like this one across Uganda. Chao Mgono, CGTN.
Well, a lot of artists are starting to showcase the unique body of work that they produced during the lockdown period. Most of them used the lockdown period to capture a place in history and also draw on the sense of fear, loneliness, and isolation that has been felt across the board. In Johannesburg, South Africa, at the Everard Reed Gallery, artist Wayne Barker is showcasing an exhibition called Love Light in the Time of Corona. CGTN's Yulisa and Jamela has more.
Packed with symbolism, history, innuendo, and pop culture, this exhibition is a critical reminder of the complexities of emptiness and offers a glimmer of salvation in the collective humanity. That's according to the exhibiting artist Wayne Barker. Barker is showcasing a body of work themed Love Light in the Time of Corona.
You know, I'd been invited to have a residency in Paris, and the lockdown happened. And suddenly I packed up my whole massive big studio, and I was left with very little material in my apartment studio. So the first thing I started doing was just painting lilies, and thinking about lilies and light. And then over time, with the limited material that I had, I thought, well, the social distancing, suddenly you can't see your friends, you can't see anybody. And the angst that I think everyone went through, I mean, no one knew what the hell is going on.
Barker says during this pandemic time, he has shifted his focus away from his critical, broader observations on society at large and began to paint portraits of the people around him. These portraits speak to the private moments, the fears and the uncertainties, but they also speak to the strength of humankind.
So the portraits came out of a very intense, I'm quite a prolific artist. I work a lot. Doesn't all end up in museums or galleries or whatever, but it's like healing in a way. I find the process of art making incredibly healing for the self.
The exhibition also reflects on the fact that the whole world has been permanently altered in the last 6 months as a result of the need to curb the spread of COVID-19. And yet, the fundamental needs of human beings remain unchanged.
I was actually reflecting my own angst and quite a lot of things. Like, I was thinking about the world, about, ownership, about suddenly you're left with basically nothing. And you're there, sure, you can shop, you can do the very basic things. And it was an interesting journey to see what is actually important in one's life. Like, it doesn't matter if you've got a massive mansion, you're not going to be able to, you know what I mean? Like, or the big car, or whatever.
Barker is well known for his bold, critical, social and political commentary. The exhibition is on display until the end of October. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And we are not done just yet. We'll see you on the other side of the break with your sports news. Here's a peek at the headlines. Cricket World Cup holders England to tour South Africa in November.